Since his video "You Cannot Be Catholic and a Democrat," Father Altman has released a handful of follow-up videos which repeat and double down on his message. I have covered some of the problems with his original message in a previous response, but I'm here condensing my thoughts into 3 main points, whilst addressing some of Father's new comments. I will begin by reaffirming what we agree on, and go on to present the serious problems with his message. In summary, Father's 3 errors are that he is naive to the fact that he is being conned by a false left-right political paradigm which doesn't exist. Secondly, compounding the issue, he is ignoring church guidance for the laity on voting, i.e. proportionate reason. And finally, he is also disregarding church teaching on clergy involvement in politics. Before we get into this, I would like to thank Father Altman for his vocation. Each priest sacrifices a lot, giving their lives to us, the laity, and to Christ. I hope to present a charitable correction to Father, but also to other clergy to whom this also directly applies, like Archbishop Bigano and others. I want to begin by clarifying, my issue here is not as a result of any disagreement with Father on abortion, human cloning, euthanasia, or gender ideology. As Catholics, we understand that these are the non-negotiable abominations of our times. That is not in dispute. What is in dispute is Father's subsequent foray into advice on voting, his partisanship. Can Catholics, clergy or laity speak publicly on moral issues? Yes, of course. The issue is that Father became a partisan in this debate, and I will show why this is unacceptable. This is also not as simple as pro-life, therefore Trump. It is naive to assume that disclosed, i.e. publicised party policies is where politics ceases. As I've said before, he is being misled by a false left-right paradigm, and the rabbit hole of geopolitics is deep. So let's take a step back. I'm going to present 3 points in a bit more detail. I've already touched on them, but let's dive a bit deeper. They are the church teaching on proportionate reason, the need for the church and the clergy to be non-partisan, and finally, falling for the false left-right paradigm. Number 1. Church teaching on proportionate reason. Even if a voter knows of a candidate's support of an intrinsic evil, they might still justifiably vote for them. Pope Benedict affirmed this in his 2004 encyclical Worthiness to Receive Holy Communion General Principles. In summary, and this is a direct quote, when a Catholic does not share a candidate's stand in favour of abortion and or euthanasia, but votes for that candidate for other reasons, it is considered remote material cooperation, which can be permitted in the presence of proportionate reasons, end quote. So it cannot be proposed that one can see all ends, and that someone might not know of a proportionate reason or many proportionate reasons to vote contrary to the outwardly perceived morally superior option. In other words, there might be other reasons behind the scenes. The second point, on the church being non-partisan, and this is an important point. The church has historically fought to remain non-partisan. Of course, the world was different during the early and Middle Ages, when the church was the centre of civilization, so of course there were times when political involvement was inevitable. But the current church teaching on this is clear. It is worth pausing at this point to read this. This is from the Congregation for the Clergy, and the document is the Directory on the Ministry and Life of Priests. Now let's pick out some of the main quotes. Father Altman makes a big point of what the FEC says about the church venturing into politics. But what does the church say? The church. what does the church say? Quote, "They are not to have an active part in political parties unless, in the judgment of competent ecclesiastical authority, the protection of the rights of the church or the promotion of the common good requires it." End quote. In other words, if the hierarchy signs it off, if your bishop signs it off. The document also says, quote, "Like Jesus, the priest ought to refrain from actively engaging himself in politics, as it often happens, in order to be a central point of spiritual fraternity. All the faithful, therefore, must always be able to approach the priest without feeling inhibited for any reason." End quote. Father ends a recent video with Lifestyle News by calling out people as inhuman, diabolical, evil beyond measurement. A third quote, quote, "The priest will remember that it does not fall on the shoulders of the pastors of the church to intervene directly in political activities and in social organizations." End quote. Quote number 4, quote, "The reduction of his mission to temporal tasks of a purely social or political nature is foreign to his ministry and does not constitute a triumph but rather a grave loss to the church's evangelical fruitfulness." End quote. And finally, the Catechism of the Catholic Church also says, quote, "It is not the role of the pastors of the Church to intervene directly in the political structuring and organization of social life." End quote. In summary, form consciences, but don't reduce the ministry to politics. For my third point, I want to cover Father's belief in a false left-right paradigm. I don't want to labour too much on this third point, as it would require a much larger video to cover this fully. The widely accepted left-right paradigm is one which all critical thinkers should question. I'm not saying we shouldn't vote, that's not what I'm saying. But once you dispel the false left-right myth, you soon realise why it is best to treat politics with a pinch of salt. If you want to discuss real politics, real geopolitics, the real manoeuvring which takes place behind party politics, then look at the backers. Look at those who prop up the figureheads. As I said, it's not in the scope of this video to cover this point in depth. It's enough to say that the world of politics is enough of a quagmire of double bluffs, rabbit holes, and proxies that a member of the clergy should certainly not be providing any definitive advice here. Do you really think this is about Trump versus Biden? Is this really about pro-life versus pro-choice? Is there perhaps a deeper chess match in play? How much of this is theatre? I want to close off by mentioning charity. There is no problem from me with Father's tone or manner. The reason I bring up charity is because of what he has said. Democrats are godless sheeple. The hierarchy are proud and arrogant. Repent of your vote or go to hell. He calls people inhuman, diabolical, and evil beyond measurement. Now, yes, I agree. Abortion, euthanasia, human cloning are horrendously evil. But are those who have not yet been given the eyes to see evil? Was Abby Johnson evil before she was given the eyes to see? Are these the correct terms we should be using when trying to change hearts? If a Catholic votes Democrat because they support abortion, euthanasia, or LGBT issues, etc., then yes, that would be wrong. But the wisdom of the guidance on proportionate reason gives an insight as to why the quagmire of politics should not be underestimated, and also why the Church should steer clear of politics and stick to upholding perennial truths or morality and life itself. The Church is above politics.